May the 11th, 2026. Mayor and Council wish to acknowledge that the meeting today is held within the traditional territory of the Inca people. So welcome to this town hall meeting, which is to look at the 2025 audited financial statements and the 2026-2030 5-year financial plan. So I will move straight over to CFO Yogi Bala, who has a presentation of the 5-year financial plan. CFO Bala.
Thank you, Your Worship. It is the time of the year again to do the town hall meeting. This is the last we set our tax rates and move forward with doing our taxes in the latter part of this month. The agenda today is a bit of background, 2025 audited results, the 2026 5-year financial plan, followed by property tax assessments and taxes payable, and village taxes versus what we collect for. So background information, we have a balanced budget, and that's part of the community charter, and that needs to be presented. And we follow fund accounting, which is to change in the coming about it. So now it is still fund accounting and general operations fund, water operations, sewer operation, and a bunch of reserves, separate accounts for each. The general fund has public works, streets and road, protected services, solid waste administration. Water fund uses segregates all stuff, the treatment infrastructure, pipes, pump houses, and reservoirs. Sewer fund similarly separates all of collection, treatment, infrastructure, pipes, lift stations, and treatment. Remember, lift stations for sewer, pump stations for water.
Yes, I've tripped up on that one a few times. It's very embarrassing when you do.
So then we've got a bunch of restricted assets and reserves. Capital Works Reserve Fund, which is a primary reserve fund, and that is to replace capitals, things as they age out, such as pipes, such as equipment, all kinds of things which are large capital. And we continue to put every year a certain proportion of our taxes directly to it. They use for ourselves first methodology. There's a sewer fund, there's a water fund, there's a machinery and equipment reserve fund, there's a perpetual care reserve fund for the cemetery, there's a fire department reserve, there's a transit reserve, and then there was a leftover growing communities fund, which is said to be utilized for sewer treatment plant upgrades. Asset breakdown. Restricted assets are 6.1 million, while unrestricted assets are 4.5. We've had an increase of 3.379 this year, primarily attributed to the monies we received for the water meters, 2.7 million. 2025 financials. The financials are split into assets and liabilities, cash and short-term investments, account receivable and other, taxes and utilities receivable and other area. Liabilities are represented by accounts payable and accrued liabilities. Accrued liabilities being those that were incurred but were not paid yet, so we accrue them as the year end. So the auditor and myself spent some time ensuring that we are accruing all the liabilities, nothing's left out. Any tax sale proceeds payable and deferred revenue. Deferred revenue is revenue received in advance, which is put aside, much like the water meter project, 2.7 million received, till we utilize it, it's deferred revenue. Financial assets increased from 7.8 million to 11.3 million. Liabilities also increased from 1.2 million to 3.8 million. It just reflects ongoing operations and what's going on as things move forward. Equity and reserve, there's financial equity and there's capital equity. In the financial side, there's surplus from operation there's any statutory reserves fund, capital asset reserve, for example, and any reserves for future expenditures which are less restricted in how we use them. And on the capital side, we've got land, buildings, engineering structures, machine and equipment. And like most municipalities, we are very capital heavy, and we own quite a significant chunk in capital. That's why, and manage those assets to get the best use of them and set aside adequate reserves to replace things as best as we can. Tangible capital assets went from 18.9 million to 18.794, 18.8 million. These are of the assets, and this decline is attributed to depreciation, basically, which is the accounting costing of assets through their life on an annual basis. Revenues and expenses, we had 5.2 million in revenues, while expenses ran at 4.7 million. You're there to be a gap on the positive side because primary sources of revenue of service, government grants, which is increasingly important, and license permits and penalties in our catch-all other category. When we look at this split, we've got municipal taxation being the largest amount, followed by government grants, followed by sales of service, and then permits and penalties for the remaining. Expenses are government general operation, protective services, transportation, environment and public health, recreation and culture, and water and sewer services. So again, looking at the split there, we've got water and sewer being a substantial portion, followed by recreation, which we have a fair bit of recreation, then followed by transportation, which is roads and sanding and maintenance and all of that, and then general services, and then followed by environment and public health as the second last, and finally protective services, which has varied quite a bit depending on what we're doing for fires and what's happening around us. Okay, that's the financials. So overall, we had an excellent year. We are continuing to build our capacity to move forward and keep the village functional. We're growing, we're investing in our infrastructure, and we're moving forward as the community starts slowly expanding and we get more residents and more buildings. The 5-year financial plan. Before I open it, I think as we all realize that this changed significantly. We are re-entered an inflationary environment, actually a stagflationary, where growth is going negative and inflation is going positive. So estimating what happens is going to be a challenge. The escalation in costs is substantial, and if in terms of you're seeing it on fuel costs, which is a base cost for a number of other things, but other base chemicals like sulfur, hydrogen, all of that is increasing, urea for agriculture. So all of those things will flow through in the next. We've already reached a point where it'll take a little while to flow through. If things stick around, I would say by July, our reserves in North America for actual fuel reserves are going to run out, and then we are going to see rationing as well as cost escalation. On the spot price, I mean, everybody focuses on futures, but spot price is running over $200 per barrel of oil, which is the actual physical traded versus the future, which are a little bit more manipulated as far as I can see. So tremendous challenges, so it's hard to plan forward. We'll do our best. This is where our financial strength at the village will help us. but things are, going to be, you'll have to start tightening your belt depending on how long and how crazy things get. So what we do is project out to 5 years, and the first year is the most careful estimate of what feeds from the budget, our detailed budget, and then I project forward, but really the uncertainty level has increased even in the first year, so that's the budget going forward for now. We'll see how we land this year. So total revenue is 10.275 million. The grants are the biggest portion. Transfer coming in from reserves is substantial. That's just money put into reserves which hasn't been used, basically deferred revenue. And those are the primary and a little bit, 3.5%. Again, on the expense side, it matches the revenue side. If you look at the bottom line, we are supposed to have balanced budget, and the financial plan reflects that. Capital is the biggest portion of our spending. Water meter project, other capital expenditures into sewer upgrades, so those are the two major ones. And the general municipal, which covers a whole range of services we were talking about earlier, that's the stable at about 2.4. So, and that bottom line again, 10.275 as a total expense matching the revenue. Any questions at this point? Yes, sir.
User fees, especially in light of our next meeting, user fees are at 1.06 mil now, and they're expected to drop in the 4 following years. I just wonder why they don't at least stay the same in the 4 following years.
Good question. User fees primarily driven by water and sewer. I could have kept it the same, not a substantial $50,000 difference, but I estimate as the economy gets the other tertiary parts of how much arena is used, pool is used, how much legacy park is used, we might have a slight decline. So that was the thinking behind that.
You were buffering the decline with the difference between those two.
Yeah, so different. It's not substantial. This is 50,000 approximately difference, right? Depending on how. But as things get tight, going past the first year again, the uncertainty level is increasing. But I expect, things to tighten up as people face more pressures.
How do you see that changing when we get to metered water versus being part of our standard utility now?
We are not really volumetric billing for a while till we've done a number of steps, got the system properly running, identified leaks, done our educational aspect to it. So it'll be a number of years before we move to any revenue. And the revenue, the net, we're not targeting any change to the overall. So balancing exactly where we were. So as a whole, people are not paying more, except those ones who are using excesses get a little, more charged, and the people at the bottom get to see a little less charged, but average keeping it the same. And we'll have to really look at how we split it, whether we consider the size of families, what the usage are people. We don't want to make it so that people struggle to water their gardens, or we're collecting additional. The idea is not to collect more, it's to get, knowing how much water is being used, and finding leaks, seeing whether, hopefully, I'm hoping the end result of the technology is that we can catch leaks earlier, people in their homes can catch leaks earlier, use those benefits which are really, valuable to, and then look at our mains if we are seeing some issues with pressure drops, and so there's a lot of work to be done. Volumetric billing, we resisted that being an issue. There's a lot of no advantages you can have from just knowing what's happening around them.
If I may, this page is the one that I'm going to use when I'm talking to the public about exactly this, and that's why I asked for the clarity in public. I'm going to go to them and say, look, here is the other fees, the user fees, this upcoming year versus the projected down the road with a very little difference between the two. Over 5 years, $200,000 expectedly, maybe, but there is the proof in budgetary language that says we are targeting an equality between what is here now and what you're going to get on volumetric. And I wanted just to clarify that so that I can take this to the public when they ask and say, there it is, and I just took a screenshot of it, so there it is in my phone. Thank you.
Good question, thank you. That can answer some of the, because the target isn't to raise things. And we've been very, also, I mean, history is, our proof of how we've managed this community. We've kept our wages very small. Utilities have only gone up 1% a year in the last 5 years. This is not a goal to collect more. It's a goal to manage our resource better so we don't end up spending more. And the critical thing, I think, if you're discussing with the community is that if we save a little bit in terms of usage, water consumption, we won't have to buy that additional train to populate it, which will cost us millions of dollars.
Right.
And that's actually critical. There is a step fix. We're getting towards the maximum output from our train. And if we have to step up, it means another train. If we can reduce the consumption a little bit and manage better, we don't have to buy it for many, many years. That saves the community quite a lot, far more than a little bit of difference in user fees.
The other thing too to point out to people is that water systems owned and operated by a government are not like private water systems. Britain is in huge trouble right now because they privatized their water systems. So they have been concentrating on paying off shareholders and skipping on repairs, etc. The Local Government Act does not specifically ban local governments from making a profit on water, but it is not encouraged. You are encouraged to put aside money for reserves for when things break down or need replacing. But that's something else I have pointed out to some people. We are not operating a water system to make money. That is not the goal. We need to cover the cost of providing the service and put some into reserves. Simple valid.
Some people get upset thinking, the rate structure will just increase their cost. That is not the purpose. We are a public body trying to manage it the best way at the lowest cost while making sure it lasts for generations to come, and that's a whole different thinking than a private company trying to profit as much as they can.
Yes.
And the goal isn't to profit. We live here, we want to keep things as reasonable as possible. Circumstances of inflation and behind that 1% increase, which is nothing really, we've had inflation of 100% on our chemical costs. We've had a huge inflation. Hydro and gas, Fortis, which is private, tends to raise rates quite consistently and quite a lot on an annual basis. So we deal with those and we try and manage the costs in those realities of running the village. So it's challenging, but we've kept it low and quite pleased with our track record of it. So moving forward, now this switching gears to taxes. Our property taxes are based on the assessed value. Assessed value is determined by BC Assessment Authority. So it's an external authority which determines what your value of your house is, and then we tax based on those values of that house. It is an independent provincial town corporation. BC Assessment mandated is to establish and maintain uniform real property assessments throughout British Columbia. Assessors determine the market value, enter those values on the assessment roll. And I download that assessment roll, cross-check it, make sure I correct any errors if there are any, and then or communicate with BC Assessment to correct those, and move forward with taxing. What happens is we take the assessed value and divide it by 1,000, and then we multiply it by the tax rate to get the taxes. Now, if your assessment shoots up, so taxes C are determined by a budget, which is a 3.5% increase. If your assessment shot up, the tax rate would come down. This year, on average, the assessments came down a little bit. So our tax rate will show a slight increase to offset to get the same amount of taxes. So we adjust for assessment. That's not universally true, but we've always done it to be absolutely fair on how we move forward. It leads to interesting calculation on the detail end, but a double, triple check to make sure we're doing it correctly. So the tax summary for this year is taxes payable are rising by 3.5%. Average single family assessment is 378,659. That's a single family house, which has decreased 15,876. Average single family tax increase, the village portion, this is important, I want to emphasize, the village portion is $25.63. That's for the single family. Why I want to emphasize it, that we collect approximately 50% of your taxes. The rest we are collecting for school, regional hospital, MFA, policing, regional district. So half the taxes we collect are going out. We are just the collectors for them, and then we remit them back to the institutions, the organizations, and we just are doing the transaction. We do not control how much they raise taxes. We can only control how much we raise taxes locally. We try and express to them when things are, we find the taxes are going too high, or we try to get our input in, but we do not. They have separate boards who decide. And it's noticeable police and school have gone up this year. So just putting that out there. This is a copy of a tax notice, just illustrating we only collect a little bit. Last but not least, a lot of details. Yes.
I just have a question that hasn't about us, but what was the school rate last year? Because I guess I've never noticed it before, but that's almost the same amount that we collect.
This is a copy of somebody's taxes, and it's on last year's. I'm just showing where it's split up.
Okay.
I can give you the rate differentials, but they've gone up.
Because I can look at my past ones.
Yeah, you notice the rate.
Yeah.
In terms of the assessment information, this is the breakdown of first the residential properties into vacant, single family, ALR, farm, and other. 877, and utilities are a class O2 class. Generally things like cables running through town, gas lines, things like that. Light industry, we've got 3. We've got business, basically small business, and then rec and non-profit, 8 instances there, and 42 for farms. So that, an average single family was calculated from there, dividing that by the number of single families. So this is a bit more detailed. It's split into general net taxable value for us, hospital taxes on hospital values, school on school. Mostly they're same, some differ, and at the school rates. So maybe I should remove this particular slide next year because it's quite information dense, but it just gives you an idea of what I work with. Any further questions?
Councilor Tippett?
The question is, what do we as a village glean from our effort, your team's effort to do all of the filings on behalf of the school district tax payable, the hospital tax payable, the MFA tax payable? Are we covering, do they cover our expenses to have you do those filings for them?
They rely on my nature.
Do they do it for other communities?
There's a little bit school and police give about $2,500 for our admin charge, but it's really minuscule. The others are, it's part of government. If other regional district, we participate in services they provide, so it's expected we support.
So there is paid. For most, there's a reciprocal association, but for some, you actually get a per diem.
Very, very little. It's more modest something. Right? But really, it's expected we collect on their behalf. That's how the system is set up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any questions on Facebook leave? No? Okay. Any other questions? Nothing? Once?